Yesterday, Cabinet sat at State House in Tebe and approved the following three decisions, and I will later on add a rider to a fourth one, which we had communicated earlier on. Decision one, as you know, there has been complaints, unending complaints about corruption and abuse. For a while now, I think 1 year, the intergovernment agencies that fight corruption have been pulling their synergies together, and they tabled their recommendations to Cabinet. Those agencies, you know them: the Inspectorate of Government, the Directorate of Public Prosecution, Parliamentary Committee on Accountabilities, among others. Because previously, each entity was like acting alone. So that has been presented to Cabinet, their joint action, and from now on, they have agreed and the Cabinet has approved the objectives of the policies, which are: one, to firmly renew government's commitment to fight corruption by strengthening synergies, collaboration, and coordination among all stakeholders, both government and non-government, for effective implementation of anti-corruption measures. Two, to institute and effectively enforce anti-corruption measures, which include enforcement and implementation of existing policies. Three, to continue with the inculcation of the culture of integrity, accountability, and patriotism at all levels. Kenneth Irupwago had made a claim that there is good working relationship among anti-corruption agencies. While it is true that the laws and policies, and indeed there is some functional relationship and working relationship among anti-corruption bodies, the synergies are not as strong and meticulous. Only recently, including today, we have seen public spat between the Land Probe Committee led by Justice Catherine Bamgemere and the mainstream judiciary, where Catherine Bamgemere is accusing the judiciary, particularly magistrates and courts, of conniving and abetting the powerful to obtain what she describes, these are her words: unlawful, fraudulent, and high-handed decisions of court. This can be a sign of frictionless relationship. You have heard only recently, 2-3 months ago, public spat between the Inspectorate of Government and Parliament over the issue of Bank of Uganda. You have heard only 2 weeks ago the judiciary, through the principal judge and the chief justice, complaining about the huge case backlog. Many of them, according to the judiciary and indeed the prisons, many of the cases in courts are cases that perhaps shouldn't have even gone to court if police had done their job well, if local councils had done their jobs well, if the lower courts had done their jobs well of mediation, because you have many cases of civil nature being entered into criminal system and clogging the system. You have had cases where people have even complained, why has the Directorate of Public Prosecution taken over cases of prosecution by the Inspectorate of Government or even private prosecution? You have had those complaints. And therefore, there is a need for building stronger synergies among these agencies so that anti-corruption fight is straightened up. And if these agencies were working well, why is it that all of us, or many of us, including the media, every day we are reporting loss of public money, fraudulent procurement, and poor service delivery? It could be in infrastructure, it could be in other forms of procurement. If these agencies were working very well and effectively, we would not be writing about abuse. The second decision, I think 3 months ago, again, we communicated this. The ratification, government has now approved the ratification of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, whose objectives are: 1, to create a single market for goods and services and the movement of business persons in accordance with Africa Agenda 2063. If you Google, you'll find Africa Agenda 2063. That Agenda 2063 is where our own Agenda 2040 fits in, to see a transformed, prosperous, coordinated, interlinked Africa. Because even if Uganda builds electricity, even if Uganda builds roads, even if Uganda has stability, if the neighboring regions don't have similar facilities, we would have wasted our efforts. So Agenda 2063 of the African Union says that by 2063, the entire African continent must be free of wars, must be stable, should be interlinked with infrastructure. 2, to promote economic, social, and cultural development and the integration of African economies in order to increase economic self-reliance. 3, to abolish among member states non-tariff barriers in order to establish a free trade area at the level of each regional economic activities. I think we have about 4 regional economic activities, rather economic blocks. We have the EAC, we have the Sahel, we have ECOWAS, and then we have COMESA, we have SEDEC. So, the idea of this is that goods and services and business persons should have free movement, non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers really apply to things like roadblocks, for example. These spot checks, this is stopping by, say, traffic police officers. A traffic police officer stops you and you spend 1 hour at that checkpoint. Those are what we refer to as non-trade barriers, non-tariff barriers. And the third decision, Cabinet noted the Forum on Africa-China Cooperation FOCAC summit that was held in Beijing between 3rd and 4th September 2018, from which a pledge of $60 billion was announced to cover the planned period of 2019-2021. Cabinet has therefore instituted an interministerial committee to study and identify opportunities and projects that can be funded under this FOCA and present them to Cabinet for consideration and financing to cover the following areas. The 60 billion should cover 1, industrial promotion, infrastructure connectivity, trade facility, green development, capacity building, health care, and people-to-people exchange for peace and security. You do recall, soon after the president returned, in that press release that was issued by PPU, there is a free industrial trade zone under this facility in Tororo. The recently commissioned fertilizer factory is part of this. And so the Interministerial Cabinet Subcommittee is supposed to study in detail and make recommendation so that feasibility studies can be undertaken and funding can be sourced. The fourth, which I said we had earlier on communicated, for those who were here about 2 months ago, we did announce that the government had approved, or Cabinet had approved, the borrowing of $87.7 million and a grant of 62.5 from the IDA, International Development Association of the World Bank Group, mainly to fund refugee host districts. At that time we made that communication, Cabinet had only considered 5 refugee host districts. When this resolution was taken to Parliament and recommended that all the 12 districts in Uganda that are hosting refugees should be considered. Consequently, the concern of Parliament has been considered, has been taken into consideration, and therefore all the 12 districts that are hosting refugees are going to benefit from, 1, the loan of 87.5 and also the grant of 62.5 million USD. And these districts are 1, Arua, Koboko, Yumbe, Moyo, Adjumani, Lamuo, Kiriandongo, Hoima, Chegegwa, Kamwenge, and Sinjiro. Yes, Cabinet has the details, but not everything that Cabinet handles comes to the media. At the time, when decisions are ready, when projects are ready, and Cabinet now goes to Parliament, it is at that point that Cabinet will disclose to the public of Uganda, because it is a requirement anyway for Cabinet to obtain the authority of Parliament to borrow this money.